Hello, I'm from Research and Sponsor Programs, and today I want to talk to you about the use of controlled substances and dangerous drugs in research. After this training, I hope you will be a little bit more comfortable with some of the rules and requirements surrounding the use of controlled substances and dangerous drugs, as well as the appropriate records you are supposed to keep, and what you will be expected to do in the case of a DEA inspection. These are some of the terms that will be used in this presentation. What is important to understand here is that a registrant is the faculty member who registers with the DEA and Ohio Board of Pharmacy to use and manage the controlled substances and dangerous drugs. On the other hand, an authorized agent is somebody who is authorized to access controlled substances or dangerous drugs under the license of a registrant. That person can be an investigator, faculty member, staff member, or student. So what is the difference between controlled substances and dangerous drugs? Dangerous drugs include all drugs that require a prescription or drugs that are labeled as prescription only, veterinary and human drugs. So for example, prescription antibiotics, non-narcotic analgesics, and include drugs such as isoflurane. Controlled substances, on the other hand, are a subset of dangerous drugs and include those drugs that are highly regulated by the DEA. Examples include ketamine, cocaine, and narcotic analgesics. Controlled substances are divided by the DEA into Schedules 1 through 5, depending on a drug's medicinal use and potential for abuse. Schedule 1 drugs have no legally recognized medicinal use and a severe potential for abuse. Schedule 3 drugs have currently accepted medicinal use and less potential for abuse relative to those in Schedule 1 and 2. So now that you know you want to use controlled substances and/or dangerous drugs in research at the University of Toledo, so what do you need to do? First, you should know that the University of Toledo policy on the use of controlled substances and dangerous drugs in animal and in vitro research sets forth requirements in a number of categories which will be discussed in this tutorial. You should look to this policy if you have any questions on the use of controlled substances and dangerous drugs, or contact me, Elaine Joseph, directly. In order to use controlled substances or dangerous drugs in research, you must first register with the Ohio Board of Pharmacy and then the DEA. Alternatively, you could obtain controlled substances or dangerous drugs from another registrant by becoming an authorized agent underneath that registrant. Before you obtain your license and registration, first notify the IACUC office. Then you'll want to request a TDDD, or Terminal Distributor of Dangerous Drugs license, from the Ohio Board of Pharmacy. The license costs $440 and is good for approximately 2 years. After obtaining your TDDD license, you can request a research registration from the DEA. The most common registration is a Schedule 2 through 5 registration. There is no cost for this registration since we are a state school, and it is good for approximately 1 year. On both your TDDD license and your DEA registration, the address you give is critically important. You'll want to give the exact building name and room number where the drugs will be stored. This is an example of an address for Health Science Campus. If you have your drugs stored at more than one location, such as in multiple laboratories, you must have a separate TDDD and DEA for each location where the drugs are stored. If you do not wish to obtain your own TDDD license and DEA registration, you could simply ask another faculty member if you could use their license and registration. You would then be acting as an authorized agent under them. What's important to remember about being an authorized agent is that you cannot store your own controlled substances in your own space. Those controlled substances remain the property and under the control of the registrant. So you have to return those controlled substances to the registrant at the end of each business day. Physical security measures are extremely important. The registrant has to make sure that controlled substances are secure from theft, loss, unauthorized access, or removal. Physical security measures have to take into account the container in which the controlled substances are kept and the room in which they're stored. Schedule 1 controlled substances must be kept in a securely locked, substantially constructed cabinet or safe that is securely fastened to the floor or wall so that it can't be easily removed. Schedule 2 through 5 controlled substances, on the other hand, must be stored in a securely locked cabinet. You can use more secure storage, such that you would use for a Schedule 1 controlled substance. Cabinets or safes that you're using for storage have to be of a size and weight that makes transport or concealment difficult. You have to have a key or a combination lock, and it should be constructed so that forced entry is easily detectable. Remember, expired controlled substances and dangerous drugs must be clearly labeled as expired. They don't have to be stored in a separate safe, but they have to be separated from the in-date items. Small cabinets and wall safes that are available for purchase from a variety of sources are examples of good storage for controlled substances. However, other options for storage for controlled substances, particularly those that fall under Schedules 2 through 5, can also include locked drawers. If you or any of your authorized agents lose the keys to your drug safe or storage cabinet, or there is some compromise in the knowledge of the access code, please immediately report this to the Toledo Police Department and the Iacocca office. Controlled substances can be purchased from a variety of pharmaceutical suppliers, however, remembering to follow the Toledo purchasing procedures. Remember, though, that orders will only be delivered to the physical address that is specified on the registrant's registration form. There are a number of times when registrants may need to dispose of controlled substances, and those are listed on the slide here. In order to properly dispose of controlled substances, you have to render them irretrievable. To do that, you can either arrange for a reverse distributor to come and pick up your controlled substances, or you can use something called Drug Buster or RX Destroyer. Both Drug Buster and RX Destroyer are easily purchased and render the controlled drugs irretrievable. You must always use a witness when destroying controlled substances. Regardless of the method you choose, you must fill out a DEA 41 form shown here. It requires you to list the drugs destroyed or picked up and the methods used. Registrants have to keep a number of records for controlled substances and dangerous drugs per the DEA and Ohio Board of Pharmacy requirements. First, registrants must keep both an initial and annual inventory of all drugs on hand. These inventories do not have to be sent in to the DEA or Ohio Board of Pharmacy, but should be kept by the registrant in their records. The inventory should have a witness and should include the relative time of day when it was performed. The DEA requires the inventory to be performed either at the start of the business day or the end of the business day. The registrant must also keep a running log or usage log of their use of controlled substances and dangerous drugs. This log has to show the type and amount of controlled substances dispensed, the name and initials of the person responsible for the use, the date of use, the number of animals injected, etc. The registrants must also keep invoices and receipts related to the purchase of controlled substances and dangerous drugs. If you're ordering Schedule 1 or Schedule 2 drugs, you'll also need to keep a copy of the DEA 222 form. A purchasing and receipt log, such as the one shown here, should also be kept for each drug ordered. Finally, it is critical that the registrant report any discrepancies noted in the amounts of controlled substances during their inventory or simply a routine check of the safe. These should be investigated, and if they are legitimate thefts or losses, they need to be reported. The U-Toledo discrepancy form can help you report significant losses and thefts to the proper authorities. These include the U-Toledo Police, the IACUC office, the DEA, and the Ohio Board of Pharmacy. So we've mentioned a lot of different records that you need to keep, but how long do you need to keep them for? Well, here at U-Toledo, we state that you need to keep your records 3 years past the time of your protocol approval. So in the case of an animal research protocol, this would be 6 years, since animal protocols are good for 3 years. In many cases, the DEA may do a pre-inspection and interview before granting you your DEA registration. This is not unusual. If the DEA contacts you for such an inspection and interview, please contact the IACUC office in Research and Sponsor Programs immediately. Research and Sponsor Programs can assist you in answering all pre-inspection questions and the inspection process itself. The inspection should always be done with the registrant and scheduled at the convenience of the DEA if possible. If and when the DEA arrives for an inspection, upon arrival of the inspectors, immediately contact the IACUC office if they're not already present. You should then ask to review the DEA inspector's credentials and ask if you need to sign a notice of inspection. Upon their request, be prepared to provide them access to your controlled substance storage space first. Over the course of a DEA inspection, the inspector will want to look at a number of items, including your actual controlled substances and your records. Make sure you answer all their questions to the best of your ability. The inspector can ask anything and go anywhere they like. They will likely take many photos and notes during the inspection. Hopefully you have learned something today about how to register to use controlled substances and dangerous drugs, the records and security measures required when using these substances, and what to do during a potential DEA inspection. If you have additional questions or need more information on the use of controlled substances in research as well as standardized forms, please see the Research and Sponsor Programs Controlled Substances webpage or contact the IACUC office directly at 419-383-5321 or iacuc@utoledo.edu.